It was not a kiss of possession, nor a plea for love in return. It was surrender itself, his solitude, his curse. 1,000 unspoken nights poured into her lips. His body trembled as though the kiss was tearing him apart, yet he held her like she was the only anchor he had ever known. The villagers whispered of him in candlelit corners, their voices hushed as though even the stones might carry words back to his ears. Mothers warned their children not to stray into the forest, for the beast of Argenholt was always listening. Once, long ago, he had been a warlord, a man whose armies painted the earth in ash and blood. His name was Darien Blackthorn. He had ruled not by crown, but by fear. His banners feared across kingdoms, but pride had drawn the eyes of something older, darker. The curse had struck him down in the height of his power, twisting his flesh into something not wholly human, not wholly beast. Now for 20 years, he ruled from the citadel that clung to the cliffs. Its black towers rose above the forest canopy, always shrouded in storm clouds, as if the heavens themselves refused to shine upon it. From there, he demanded tributes of coin, of harvest, and of cattle. Herds vanished into the black citadel, their cries echoing in the night, and none were ever seen again. They said his claws dripped with the blood of his enemies, that his roar could shatter bone. Some whispered he drank blood. Others swore he kept cages of screaming souls, but Erwin, daughter of the village healer, did not rely on whispers. She had seen the aftermath of his raids firsthand. Cattle snatched from trembling farmers, fields trampled and set ablaze, villagers beaten in desperate skirmishes with his men, their blood staining the mud. She had stitched gaping wounds, pressed coins into the palms of the starving, and dug graves with her own hands. She had felt the anger, fear, and hopelessness that hung over the village like a thick, choking fog. When the collectors came again that winter, demanding cattle from a widow who had none, Erwin stood in the doorway of the crumbling cottage, hands steady despite her racing heart. "You will not take from her," she said, her voice sharp as flint. The men laughed, but when she would not move, they bound her wrists. She did not scream, did not beg. Her gaze burned with defiance even as they dragged her through the snow toward the forest. That night, beneath a sickle moon, Erwin crossed the threshold of the citadel, its gates groaning like the jaws of some great beast. She was not the first to be brought there, but she swore she would not be broken. The beast of Argenholt would not have her. Obedience, not while breath lived in her. Chest, the citadel was a tomb of stone and silence. Its halls reeked of damp earth and smoke, the torch flames burning green with unnatural fire. Every step Erwin took echoed like a warning. They brought her before him in the great hall. The beast of Argenholt stepped from the shadows, and the breath caught in her throat. He was no mindless monster. His body was tall and broad, built like a warrior carved from obsidian, muscles taut beneath scarred skin that bore the faint shimmer of ash-gray fur along his shoulders and arms. His face was sharp, cruelly handsome, high cheekbones, a strong jawline, and in his eyes she saw a storm that left her trembling, grayish silver, piercing, cold yet unbearably human. His hands, though monstrous, were not grotesque. The claws were long, pale, glinting faintly like polished bone. They looked capable of tearing men apart, yet elegant, precise, like the tools of both a killer and a king. "You dared defy me," he growled. His voice rumbled like distant thunder, sinking deep into her chest. Erwin lifted her chin, though her knees trembled. "You've taken enough from us. I'll not let you starve a child." For a moment, his lips curved, not in kindness, but in something darker. Amusement, defiance, he said, his tone almost tasting the word. "Interesting." He circled her slowly, his shadow crawling along the walls like a second beast. "You'll serve me, healer," he murmured, low enough to prickle her skin. "Or you'll rot in my dungeons until your bones beg to be forgotten." Her heart thundered in her chest. She wanted to scream, to strike him, to weep. But she did none of these. She only stared at him with fire in her eyes, as if her hatred alone could scorch the curse from his flesh. He smiled then, sharp and cold. And in that moment terror gripped her heart. She realized the full weight of what she had done. The citadel never slept. Its walls groaned as if the stone itself was alive, and the wind carried voices that did not belong to the living. Erwin lay awake on her straw-stuffed mattress, staring into the dark. That was when she heard it, a scream, not human. It echoed through the halls. Ragged, otherworldly, like metal tearing through flesh. Another followed, shrill and unearthly, until the sound thickened into a chorus of wails. She pressed her palms to her ears. Still, the voices seeped through. The next day, when Darian entered her chamber, she spat the question before fear could stop her. What prowls these halls at night? He studied her for a long moment. His silver-gray eyes reflected the torchlight like shards of a broken mirror. You wish to know what chains me? His voice was low, almost weary. Come. He led her down corridors lined with runes older than kingdoms, their glow faint but alive. The air grew colder as they descended, until even her breath felt heavy. At last, they reached the boundary stones, a circle of jagged pillars half buried in the frozen earth, etched with words she could not read. Beyond them, the world was darker than night, and in that darkness, shapes, shadow creatures clawing at the stones, their bodies smoke and ash, their mouths wide with endless hunger. Their howls rattled her bones. She stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. Darian's claws flexed, but his voice carried no triumph. Only bitterness. The curse demands more than my flesh. It demands blood. Mine or theirs? Erwin's pulse hammered in her ears. You expect me to believe this? You saw them. His tone cut sharp, but his gaze flickered with something softer, fleeting. Do you think I crave this form? That I delight in terror? My cruelty, girl, keeps far worse from your door. Her chest burned. She wanted to deny him, to spit in his face, to cling to her hatred. But the memory of those shadows gnawed at her. For the first time, her hatred wavered, not into forgiveness, but into confusion. The air inside the Warlord's fortress grew heavy that night. Storm clouds pressed against the cracked windows, thunder growling in rhythm with the Darian's restless pacing. Erwin sat by the cold stone wall, her hands bound loosely. He no longer tied her too tightly, for she never fled. She had stopped trying, not out of surrender but out of grim patience, waiting for the right moment, the right weakness. He watched her with those gray-silver eyes, restless, burning, haunted. Something inside him gnawed with a hunger far older than desire. She was defiance wrapped in fragile beauty, and the curse inside him snarled for her as much as his own desperate heart did. You don't fear me anymore, he muttered, his voice a low rasp. You should. Erwin met his gaze, unflinching. Fear is wasted on you. You're just a man drowning in chains you forged yourself. The words struck deep. His jaw clenched, claws twitching against his palms. That sharp tongue of hers, it both wounded and enthralled him. He stepped closer. She rose instinctively, backing against the wall. Her breath caught as his looming shadow swallowed her, his chest heaving with ragged restraint. I should kill you for speaking to me so, Darian growled. Yet his voice cracked as though even the threat was hollow. His clawed hand pressed against the wall beside her, caging her in. And then it broke. His restraint, his silence, his torment. With a sound torn between anguish and hunger, he crushed his lips against hers. It was no gentle touch, no careful question. It was fire, violent and desperate. His claws grazed the stone behind her, cracking it as he held himself back from clutching too hard. Erwin stiffened, her hands shoving against his chest. Her heart thundered with rage, revulsion, betrayal. This was not hers to give. He had stolen it. She tore her mouth free with a sharp cry. Monster! She spat, her hand striking his cheek. The echo rang in the chamber. Darian froze, breath shaking. Her words cut deeper than any blade ever could. For a moment, he didn't look like a monster at all, just a man shattered by his own hunger. His lips parted, but no apology came, only a hoarse whisper. I could not stop. Erwin's eyes burned with hatred and despair. She turned away, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand as though to erase him from her skin. And the Warlord, the beast feared by kingdoms, staggered back as though struck by lightning, the taste of her rejection bitter on his tongue. The storm outside broke open, thunder splitting the sky, as if the heavens themselves had witnessed the betrayal. The storm battered the citadel, lightning carving the sky into jagged veins. Through the rain, a figure approached. An old healer, cloak heavy with mud. At his side walked a hooded mage, staff humming with unseen power. "Release my daughter," the healer called, his voice trembling yet resolute. The beast emerged from the shadows, gray-silver eyes gleaming, claws curling. "You dare step into my den?" His growl shook the stone itself. The mage lifted his staff, chanting words that clawed at the air. Light flared, striking the beast and coiling around him like molten chains. He staggered, snarling, every muscle straining against the ancient binding spell. For a heartbeat, the storm seemed to pause. "Erwin!" the healer shouted. Erwin broke from the shadows and ran straight into her father's arms. The healer held her tight, sobbing with relief. "You're safe," he whispered. She looked back once, the beast writhed in the grip of light, his silver-gray eyes burning with betrayal and longing. He did not plead. He only roared, the sound cracking the walls. The mage pulled them toward the doors. They slammed shut behind them, leaving the beast alone in the black citadel. His shoulders heaved, rage boiling in his chest. With a final, bone-shaking roar, he shattered the bonds. The magic splintered like glass under the force of his will. But he did not chase them. He did not run after the healer or his daughter. His silver-gray eyes stayed fixed on Erwin as she clung to her father, her face turned toward the warmth of freedom she had longed for. When she glanced back, it was not sorrow he saw in her gaze, but a flicker of hatred. Hatred for the chains, the fear, and for the monster who had kept her. That look shattered something within him. His roar caught in his throat, his claws trembling as if they no longer knew whether to rend or to reach. For one aching heartbeat, the storm outside seemed gentler than the storm inside his chest. Then the doors closed, and she was gone. The silence left behind was unbearable. His breath broke ragged, his shoulders shook, and from the wound of that single glance, fury erupted. With a cry that split the heavens, he shattered the shackles and rose, a storm-given flesh. Yet Erwin sat in the quiet of her small cottage, wrapped in a threadbare shawl, her hands trembling as if still caught in invisible chains. The memory of his touch lingered, cold yet searing, raw with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The kiss, she could not call it sweet. It had been violent, possessive, a strange, broken claim that left her uneasy and shivering. It burned across her mind like a brand she could neither soothe nor erase. From the edge of her window, she saw smoke curling above the village fields. His shadow loomed again, not himself, but the chaos he commanded. Men under his command stormed through the livestock pens, snatching cattle and goats from trembling farmers. Villagers stumbled and shouted, trying to resist, their arms bruised and bloodied from skirmishes with his men. Erwin's stomach knotted. Relief that she was alive warred with guilt and helplessness. He had left destruction in his wake, and she could do nothing but watch, for she remembered. While she had been with him, the villagers had known peace. Every night, when the darkness stirred and unspeakable creatures crept from the cursed woods, it was the beast who fought them back, alone, unseen. His violence had been turned against the horrors beyond their walls, never against the people themselves. And now, freed of her presence, his fury no longer guarded, it consumed. In the hollow of her heart, a thought grew heavy and dangerous. Should I return to him? If her being by his side had once kept the village safe, could it do so again? Could she step willingly into the arms of the beast who shattered her, and yet, in his broken way, had shielded them all? The village burned for 3 nights. The beast's fury was merciless. Barns blackened, fields salted by fire, men dragged screaming into the woods. Erwin knew then his wrath was not blind. It was aimed at all but her, and that frightened her more than his claws ever had. Days later, she returned to the crumbling fortress on her own. Her father begged her not to go, but she walked anyway, heart heavy with guilt. The village whispered she had bewitched him. She knew better. She had seen his demons. The beast emerged from the shadows, his half-human, half-shadow form looming tall, silver eyes wide and unblinking. For a moment he simply stared, as if the sight of her was impossible. Then his voice broke, rough with disbelief and something like wonder. You came back? This ends, she said coldly. No more raids, no more fire. If you want me here, it will be by my terms. His jaw tightened, claws flexing against the stone, but he nodded. Stay, And the village lives. So she stayed. Nights passed in uneasy silence. He lingered at the edges of her world, his gaze hungry, his touch restrained. When he tried to close the space between them, she pulled back, not with hatred anymore, but with an icy wall he could not breach. And yet, she tended his wounds without being asked. She left food near his chamber when he didn't eat. She spoke to him, not kindly, but not cruelly either. It was not love, but it was not loathing anymore. It was something in between. For the first time, the beast realized what true torment was. Not her hatred, but her nearness, her presence every night, her voice in his halls, paired with the unreachable coldness that kept her just out of his arms. He had her, and yet he did not. Still, the battles with the creatures beyond the boundary stones raged on. Each night he returned bloodied and breathless, the curse dragging him to war without end, and she was always there, silent witness to both his strength and his breaking. The citadel was treacherous. Stone steps worn smooth by centuries of warlords. Slick with damp from the storm, one evening, as Erwin carried a basin of water through the halls, her foot slipped. The world tilted. The basin crashed, shattering, water spilling across the stone. She struck the stairs with a cry, pain flaring through her side. Before she could rise, he was there. "The beast! Darian!" His claws retracted, trembling, as he gathered her into his arms as though she were porcelain. His silver-gray eyes burned, but not with hunger. Something softer, something she almost didn't recognize. "Foolish girl," he muttered, his voice rough with panic. "You could have broken your neck." She tried to push him away, her pride sparking, but the pain in her ribs made her falter. So she let him lift her, carry her to his chamber where firelight flickered against the walls. His touch, though marred by claws, was careful as he wrapped her wounds, his great hands almost gentle. "You should have called for me," he said, almost accusing, but his gaze refused to leave her face. Erwin's throat tightened. She hated how her body softened under his care, hated how her heart betrayed her with the faintest ache of gratitude. He was the beast, the terror of Argenholt. And yet, in that moment, he was simply a man holding her as if the world would shatter without her in it. For the first time, she didn't recoil from his closeness. She met his gaze, cold, still, but not sharp as before, and he, shaken and breathless, lowered his head as if to hide the storm within him. That night, though nothing passed between them, the distance between healer and monster thinned to a fragile thread. The nights stretched on, each one a careful dance around the truth neither dared name. She lived in his halls now, by choice, by bargain, by something more binding than chains. He fought, he bled, and she was always there with bandages and steady hands. Her hatred was gone, but not replaced with love. What lingered was stranger, pity, weary understanding, and a bond forged in silence. One night, when the storm clawed at the windows, he entered her chamber without a word. His chest rose and fell raggedly, silver eyes bright with desperation, his claws curling at his sides. She rose from her seat by the fire, startled, but before she could speak, he seized her face in his hands. His mouth claimed hers. Rough, fierce, starved. It was a kiss not of romance, but of a man drowning who clutched at the nearest breath. And she did not stop him. Not out of love, not out of surrender, but because she saw the torment in him, the centuries of hunger, loneliness, the demons gnawing at his soul. In his kiss she tasted despair more than desire, and though her body stiffened, she let it happen. When he pulled away, his breath shuddering, his forehead rested against hers as if he were a man moments from collapse. Her lips trembled, not from longing but from the weight of what she had allowed. She did not return the kiss, but neither had she denied it. The curse was tightening. Each battle with the creatures left him more broken, his strength waning as though the curse itself was eating him alive. For years, the beast had kept the barrier standing not only with his own blood, but with the blood of others. When the curse demanded more strength than his body could give, he sent his hunters to seize livestock from the villages, driving cattle and sheep to the stones where their cries fed the dark magic. And when that was not enough, sometimes villagers vanished. A thief, a drunkard, a man too slow to run when the collectors came. By the final night, when the barrier trembled and the citadel shook, the beast knew the cycle could not go on. His strength was spent, no more animals, no more villagers, so he chose himself. But before he left, he turned to her. Erwin stood frozen, her lips parted, her hands trembling at her sides. She wanted to speak, to stop him, but no words would come. He crossed the distance between them, slow and deliberate, as if every step carried the weight of what he knew would be the end. I have no gift but my ruin, no vow but my heart. Take it, even if it dies with me, he said, voice hoarse and heavy with emotion. His silver eyes, fierce and haunted, locked onto hers, and she could hear the ragged rhythm of his heartbeat. The uneven rise and fall of his breaths, the shadow of the curse clung to him. But so did the raw, desperate humanity beneath it. For a long moment, they simply stared. She saw the pain he had carried for decades, the endless battles, the sacrifices, the loneliness that had shaped him into this half-shadowed monster. And in that instant, she understood everything, the fury, the torment, the depth of his love that had never asked for hers. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, her lips pressed against his, soft but unwavering. It was not love, not fully, not yet, but a surrender of recognition, of empathy, of the fragile solace they had found in each other. He froze for a heartbeat, then closed his eyes, letting himself lean into her. His arms came around her, not to possess, but to hold, to cherish this fleeting warmth in the face of the abyss. And for that single, stolen moment, the monster and the healer's daughter were just two broken souls, finding a whisper of peace before the end. It was not a kiss of possession, nor a plea for love in return. It was a pouring out, a surrender, 1,000 unspoken nights pressed into her lips. The weight of his curse, the bitter truth of his solitude, and the fragile joy she had unknowingly given him. His body shook as if the kiss itself was tearing him apart, but he held her as though she were the only anchor he had ever known. When he finally pulled away, his breath lingered warm against her skin, his voice raw. "Even without your love, I am yours." Then, without waiting for her to answer, he turned from her warmth and walked toward the stones. At the rift, he threw his body into the storm, silver eyes blazing, shadows swarmed him, clawing, devouring, shrieking for more. But instead of letting the curse drain him slowly, as it had for decades, he let it consume him all at once. His roar split the night, a sound of rage and release. The creatures burned away in his fury, their shrieks swallowed by the fire of his sacrifice. The ground shook, the rift sealed. The stones glowed with the silver of his eyes, then went still. And when dawn came, the barrier still held, the kingdom still stood. But he was gone. He had found redemption, not in victory, but in her presence. Erwin walked the empty halls alone. She touched the stone where his hand had once rested, felt the silence where his voice had thundered. And though she had never loved him as he longed for, her chest ached with a grief she could not name. But at night, when the wind howled through the trees, she would turn her head as if expecting to see silver eyes gleaming in the dark. He was gone, yet he was everywhere, and in the cold silence of her heart, she wondered if she had betrayed him by never loving him back, or saved him by letting him go.